Earlier this week, Sydney Harbour, one of the most photographed and infamous waterways in the world, was plunged into a bit of shark chaos. On a warm January afternoon, inside what a few Australians would probably consider to be relatively safer waters, a child was pulled bleeding from the harbour. 24 hours later, less than 20 kilometres away, a surfboard took a hefty bite from a shark, and before the sun set that very same day, a man was fighting for his life at Manly's northern Stane beach. Metropolitan Sydney wasn't the only place seeing incidents, as further up the coast within the New South Wales state, a fourth incident was reported in Port Macquarie, where a surfer was bitten. 4 shark attacks in 2 days, leading to one question suddenly on everyone's mind. Is something changing in the waters off New South Wales? Because if you were to read the Facebook comments, you'd be led to believe that something was changing. Or, on the other hand, is there an element of misunderstanding about what's going on here? Well, tonight we'll be taking a step back from the headlines and panic, looking carefully at what happened, where it happened, and importantly, what the science actually tells us about Sydney's shark bite cluster. Welcome back to another Shark Bites episode, everyone. Now, just before we start, you guys will have to forgive me a little bit if this video is a bit more hastily edited than usual. I've been away for a few days and I've been trying to catch up and get this video out as quickly as I could. Also, for anyone new to the channel, I'm Kristian Parton, a marine biologist and shark researcher, and I'm known here on Shark Bites, I'd like to think anyway, for breaking down incidents like this in a scientific and measured way, without the added hysteria. And I think that's a really important way to discuss incidents like this, openly, honestly, and scientifically. Right, okay, let's begin then with the timeline of events here. On January 18th, 2026, at Nielsen Park, also sometimes known as Shark Beach, a 12-year-old boy was swimming near the shoreline when he was bitten. This location here, of course, isn't open ocean. It's not a surf break. It's almost slap bang in the middle of Sydney Harbour. Nielsen Park reportedly has a swimming area protected by shark nets, although there are several accounts that these nets were damaged in 2025, and as of late September 2025, the repair of these nets had been delayed. To be fair, I've not read anywhere that this boy was swimming within that netted or broken netted area, but what I have read is that he was cliff jumping somewhere along here. This western spot of the Nielsen Park is popular with teenagers who enjoy cliff jumping off the rocks into the bay, and importantly, it's not an area that has shark nets. I'm also pretty sure it was where famous vlogger iShowSpeed filmed a cliff jumping video last year, hence its increased popularity with Australian youngsters. The young lad in question was reportedly bitten very badly on his legs, although despite the quick thinking of his friends who were able to apply a shark tourniquet and get him medical attention quickly, he unfortunately died in hospital from those wounds yesterday on Saturday the 24th of January, and I'd like to extend my sincerest condolences to his friends and family. Now, less than 24 hours later on the northern beaches, specifically at DY Point, a young surfer, reportedly again around 11 or 12 years old, felt something strike his board. He managed to paddle back to shore, and the damage to his board was, of course, unmistakable. That right there is a 15 to 20 centimeter chunk bitten out the side of that board. Now, that bite radius there is actually relatively small. It's about the same size as the narrow width of an A4 piece of paper. So that shark we're talking about there is likely a smaller individual, probably around 4 to 5 feet long. Thankfully, the boy was completely unharmed in the incident, and as a precaution, Northern Beaches Council temporarily closed the surrounding beaches. But what we're getting here right now are warning signs. That same evening after 6 p.m, another serious incident of the cluster occurred, this time at North Stane Beach, one of Australia's most iconic surf beaches. A 27-year-old was bitten on the leg by a shark while he was surfing. Surf cams on the beach captured the moment of the incident, and you can see the intensity of that splash as he's hit by the shark. Thanks to the quick work of a few other surfers and bystanders, they managed to get him back to shore and he was rushed to hospital. Reports actually came out on Tuesday that on his way to hospital, he was actually met with a life-saving blood transfusion on the middle of Spit Bridge over here, which I'm sure has saved his life. So by nightfall on the 19th of January, Sydney had experienced 3 shark attacks in under 36 hours, 2 of them involving severe leg injuries across both harbour and open coast environments. But Sydney wasn't alone. During the same period, another surfer was bitten near Port Macquarie, about 240 miles north of Sydney. This one took place at Point Paloma Beach and involved a 39-year-old male surfer who sustained minor injuries to his chest, but other than that, he came off relatively unscathed. So we've got an extended pattern here that stretches past a single beach, a single council, or a single shark. And it's of course no longer just an isolated incident, but a statewide cluster. Now, based on the locations and the timings, I'd say it is incredibly unlikely that these incidents were from the same shark. So in my opinion, we can rule that out immediately. This is almost certainly 4 separate incidents from 4 individual sharks. And I'd say that that's backed up by the evidence of some of those bites, So the cliff jumper and the surfer at Manly both sustained, by the sounds of it, pretty catastrophic injuries to their legs, so you'd likely say that these two incidents were from larger sharks. Whereas the young surfer at DY and the 39-year-old surfer at Point Paloma had bite radius evidence and only minor injuries that would suggest smaller individual sharks. Now, based on the severity of the bites and some of the environmental conditions that we're going to be talking about in a minute, I would say it was very likely that all 4 of these bites came from bull sharks. White sharks are a bit less common off Sydney during the peak of summer, and sure, there could be the odd one still kicking around, but bull sharks are the most dominant in these waters at this time of year. Bull sharks who like to hang out in those warmer waters typically arrive in Sydney around October, with a peak in their sightings in January and February, aka right about now. Interestingly here, as Sydney's waters continue to increase in their average temperature, research has shown that bull sharks are now spending on average 15 more days off Sydney's coast during the summer than they were 15 years ago. In science terms, this is called residency. So these bull sharks over the last 15 years have been increasing in their residency at summering grounds off Sydney. That's what the science is telling us anyway. Essentially, they're arriving earlier and staying longer, which of course increases the potential for shark-human encounters. Bull sharks are one of the most uniquely adapted sharks that we have on the planet. Their preferred hunting habitats are shallow, brackish waters which naturally have low visibility, and they'll regularly move up into river systems and estuaries, including Sydney Harbour. These sharks have been present in Sydney Harbour and the surrounding waters for many, many years, but their mere presence doesn't explain why we've had a spate of incidents in such a short space of time. For those of you that are familiar with the channel, when we've spoken about shark attacks in the past, you'll know that I am a firm believer that environmental conditions and context play a big role. And in the days leading up to these incidents, at least in metropolitan Sydney anyway, we had some serious environmental conditions. In the week leading up to these shark bites, specifically on Friday the 16th and Saturday the 17th, Sydney had some severe thunderstorms and heavy rain, resulting in flash floods. They were so bad that some residents in parts of Sydney's northern beaches had to actually be evacuated because of the threat to life. Sydney's official weather station here at Observatory Hill recorded 127 millimeters of rain. Its wettest January day in 38 years. When you get high levels of rain, sewage systems are just overwhelmed, and that sewage water, as well as natural runoff from the land, ends up in the harbours and the ocean. In environmental conditions, this is called turbidity. So not only does it create murky, brackish water where there's almost no visibility, but it also draws in bait fish who are keen to feed on the scraps closer to shore. A few years back now, scientist Dr. Yuri Niela actually demonstrated this spatial movement between bulls and bait fish within, you guessed it, Sydney Harbour. The tracking data Yuri got back, which spans over 10 years by the way, showed that after these high rainfall events, male bull sharks move into the shallow waters upstream in less than a day after that rain. Females end up following a few days later, but they're both responding here to a spatial redistribution of their teleost fish prey species. So less than a day after that rain, you're getting very obvious movements of adult male bull sharks towards those shallower inshore waters of Sydney Harbour and the surrounding areas. So on Saturday the 17th, I imagine you'll have had a massive influx of bull sharks into these areas, and that's putting them in close proximity with water users, i.e. swimmers and surfers. But it's not just the odd swimmer or surfer, it's thousands and thousands of people using the waters around Sydney at any one point in time because it's summer, the waters are warm. More people in the water and more sharks because of those environmental conditions means that you've got a spatial overlap there that unfortunately is going to result in more shark attacks. These sharks are instinctive hunters, and when they're swimming around in brackish water, they will fire out explorative bites at anything they think might be food. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time in those low visibility environments, a bull shark can absolutely bite you. I think at the same time here, on the flip side, science communicators and shark conservationists, me included, need to be mindful about how we're discussing this to you guys. Because I think when some people see a conservationist or perhaps even a scientist say that all of these incidents are as a result of mistaken identity, that can have the opposite effect of what we want it to have. Because the bull shark that's bitten the boy who was cliff jumping, based on the severity of his injuries, likely received multiple bites. So if you're trying to convince people that that's mistaken identity when a shark's taken multiple bites, that's a tough sell. But instead, what the bull shark is doing there is, like I said, exploratively biting. When they're exploring things that they think might be food, you can absolutely get multiple explorative bites because that shark's just gone bang. This thing that I've just hit might be prey. Fire off those bites and get it. And when that comes from a 6-foot adult bull shark, those explorative bites can be deadly. Now, brackish, murky water and explorative hunting aren't the only factors at play here. We briefly spoke about temperature a minute ago, and that right there's a big one too. Over the last month, month, the waters around the New South Wales coastline have been experiencing temperatures up to 2 degrees above average for the time of year. And those warm tropical waters are shifting down the coast towards the more southern areas like Sydney, meaning the bull sharks come with it. But it's not just about their temperature preferences here. It's also about what those warm waters are doing to their bodies physiologically. Warmer water means that shark metabolism increases, so they're burning through more energy. They've got to replace that energy, and the only way to do that is eat more food, so their activity levels goes up and they're hunting more. And where are they hunting that food? In the shallow, inshore, brackish waters where all the people are. It's a perfect storm of conditions here where multiple factors are all coming into play at around about the same time. Now, when we get several incidents like this that have happened in a very short space of time, you have to be mindful that the discourse around the topic intensifies. In the aftermath of this, you're likely going to hear a lot of people, some of whom have big followings, calling for shark culls. They're the same people who call for a cull every time there's a shark attack. But there is so much citable evidence for the ineffectiveness of shark culls across the board. We know that they have very little to zero impact on reducing the number of shark bites on humans. There's evidence. The people calling for the culls here are probably claiming that shark populations in New South Wales have utterly exploded in the last 15 or 20 years and they're at plague proportions. But I can tell you right now, other than a few occasional reports from some scientists who say there may be anecdotal evidence of some shark population increases across the entire eastern coast of Australia. And when I say the entire east coast of Australia there, I'm referring to Queensland as well, which, according to their numbers, doubled in shark catches in their control program from 2024 to 2025. And because that's a great headline, you'll have likely seen more of the sharks explode in Queensland articles being thrown at you that gives you the perception that all these deadly sharks have swarmed together and are ready to eat you. But if we just have a look into that data, which as of the time of making this video, I can only seem to find within a paywalled Aussie online newspaper because the official stuff hasn't been released on the Queensland government database, we can see some of the breakdowns here. So yes, total sharks caught went from 1,497 to 3,424, but in the list there, nearly half of them are from sharks that aren't considered to be particularly dangerous species to humans. Spot-tail sharks, pig-eye sharks, and tawny nurse sharks have very rarely bitten humans, so that's over a third of those 3,424 sharks straight off the bat. We can see that bull sharks in Queensland went from 206 to 345, which is an increase, yes, but not one that would suggest a population explosion in Queensland. To be honest, I'm not even really sure I can take this presented dataset entirely seriously anyway, when it claims they caught one spot-tail shark that was over 5 meters long, which, considering the species very rarely reaches 2 meters, sounds a tad exaggerated. Anyway, I've been sidetracked. As of currently, there is no peer-reviewed scientific evidence that this is the case for bull sharks in New South Wales. Not one piece of factual evidence that can be cited. Take this hypothetical situation. Let's presume for a minute that bull sharks in Sydney Harbour are in plague proportions and they've gotten far more aggressive in the last 15 years. If that was true, wouldn't we be seeing repeated bull shark attacks in huge numbers at the same time? Like, say, 4 every single month throughout the summer. But we aren't. The logic there doesn't make much, if any, sense. You can't take incidents like this in isolation and then make sweeping conclusions about shark population numbers without broader evidence. Cluster incidents like this aren't the easiest thing to explain, don't get me wrong, but they're far more easily explained by a variety of human and environmental factors than just shark populations have exploded. The phenomenon that we've seen on display here as well, guys, isn't just isolated to New South Wales and Australia. The mechanisms for what we've seen here have been seen time and time again in places like North Carolina, South Africa, the Whitsundays, Reunion Island, and even in places you wouldn't expect like Hong Kong. That Hong Kong one's a super interesting one there because for 4 years in the early 90s, Hong Kong was one of the most dangerous places in the world for shark attacks. So if you want me to cover that in a video at some point, make sure you let me know in the comments. What I'm trying to say here is that what we're seeing in New South Wales isn't a new thing, and it's not just isolated to this location. We see it happening all around the world, arguably in places where shark population numbers are maybe lower. And when you look at the broad data and the site-specific research here, there isn't any evidence of explosive bull shark population increases. What the research does show us, though, is is that adult bull sharks use the waters around New South Wales and Sydney quite specifically. The likelihood of detecting these big adults on acoustic arrays in shallow inshore waters increases in the summer. It increases between the hours of midday and 4 a.m. It increases when water temperatures are higher than 20 degrees Celsius. It increases after more than 45 millimeters of rain, and when swell heights are between 1.8 and 2.8 meters. Your males move quickly after that rain, and your females lag behind by a few more days. Those are a set of fairly specific factors there that can be used to facilitate public safety. And if you use that data to create educational campaigns for people, then those people are better able to make informed decisions. Now, I'm not pointing the finger at those people who have been bitten by sharks in this cluster, but you have to ask the question, did those people really understand the consequences of those environmental conditions? If you'd have said to the lad who was cliff jumping before he jumped, hey, after that mad rain we had, there's way more likely to be hunting adult bull sharks down there, would he still have jumped? I think the New South Wales government could do with a ton more investment into these educational campaigns. Another one that stands out for me here would be the time of day, right? So you're normally thinking that maybe dawn or dusk are the riskier times to go in the water, but the data that we're seeing for Sydney's bull sharks and the incidents that have happened, that maybe midday or just after midday might need to be highlighted as also risky times to go in the water. I don't know, it's just one of those things there that maybe you think more information needs to be made accessible to people. In the end here, we've got to remember that these animals are incredibly important to marine ecosystems, and there's always more advanced and modern mitigation measures that can be used instead of culls, ones that actually work. What do you guys think then? Do you agree with my environmental analysis? Do you disagree? I want to hear all your thoughts in the comments. Although, if you did find this analysis informative today, then you might quite enjoy this video right here. In it, we look at shark feeding frenzies and the fatal incident that happened in Hedera last year, analysing why those dusky sharks ended up killing that snorkeler, so make sure you give it a click.